Welcome back. Today I'm going to be bringing you my wide receiver rankings for the 2026 draft. If you do enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing. It would be very much appreciated. Now let's jump into it. At 16, I've got Jacoby Lane out of USC, and I've got a UDFA evaluation on him. I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking at with Jacoby Lane, as you're going to hear me moan about with 2 or 3 of these receivers that I'm low on. No receiver in today's NFL can make a living on contested catch ability. There are guys who can find themselves half a yard and with minimal space can catch the ball through traffic. But this guy is going to get shut down in the NFL. He doesn't have the movement skills to separate, and even if he has a 50% contested catch rate, that's not good enough if every catch is contested. At 15, I've got Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame, and I've got a day 3/UDFA evaluation on him. I won't overcomplicate this. Malachi Fields is a contested catch threat. He is sensational when it comes to bringing the ball in through contact, and he is pretty good at selling his routes, but he is not capable of changing direction fast enough to gain separation on NFL corners consistently. So if you think in today's NFL it's worth spending an early pick on a receiver who is almost never open because he catches the ball well despite not being open, this is the one for you. But I don't see how he fits into an NFL offense. At 14, I've got Denzel Boston out of Washington, and I've got a day 3 evaluation on him. I would argue Denzel Boston is the most overrated receiver in this draft class, which has now started to become a trend in my opinion on Washington receivers generally. In 2024, people were genuinely talking about Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors as a toss-up on who to draft. He went 9th overall. I didn't think he was a terrible receiver, but he was a second rounder to me, which I would like to think in hindsight was a pretty fair evaluation. And then that year you also had Ja'Lynn Polk coming out of Washington. He got drafted in the 2nd round by the Patriots. I had him as a UDFA receiver, and again I'm going to give myself some flowers for this one because this was not the consensus opinion whatsoever, but in the last 2 seasons he's had a total of 87 receiving yards, so I think it's fair to say I was onto something. Now, I am always super conscious of my own biases, and I made sure to not just automatically paint Denzel Boston with the same brush as those other Washington receivers, but I did come to the same conclusion. And I should give credit to Washington head coach Jedd Fisch, who calls the plays, because the thing I keep seeing with these Washington receivers is they are being schemed into space over and over and over again, and therefore getting way overdrafted. Boston has plenty of good traits. He's got size, he's a contested catch threat, he's actually got some decent burst for his size, but the change of direction is too slow to gain separation. He will need to be schemed into space or be used as a pure contested catch threat, which, as I've spoken about, isn't exactly my cup of tea. At 13, I've got Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama. Jeremy Bernard reminded me of when you watch a film and the start of the film is kind of interesting and you're waiting for the plot to develop, and then 40 minutes in, you're still waiting, and then you get to the last 20 minutes of the film and realize nothing's actually happened. Bernard kind of drifts around, there's not a lot of speed, there's no real intensity, he'll just pick up pockets of space, and he's really good at bringing the ball in through some contact. But he's not the biggest guy, so I was waiting to see the explosiveness, whether it be speed or elusiveness as a route runner, and it never came. The reason he's here on the ranking is that I could see him having some sort of role for an NFL team. His after the catch ability is interesting because, a bit like his route running, it's very casual, but it works with the ball in his hands the same way it does with a running back. He's very patient, he's got excellent balance, defenders will just drop off him, so I could see a team wanting to find ways of getting the ball in his hands, but as a receiver, he just lacks something. At 12, I've got Chris Bell out of Louisville. Chris Bell was a successful 200-meter sprinter in high school, and I don't know what the narrative is in terms of his speed, but don't be fooled. He's very rarely going to be running in a straight line long enough to use his long-strided sprinter speed, and as an NFL receiver, his movement is very rigid. What he's really good at is getting an inch of space early, he's very crafty off the line, and then he's big and physical with strong hands, which is why 70% of his receptions come in the 0 to 9 yard region. He could have a role in the NFL as a big slot, but I'm not seeing the upside. At 11, I've got Antonio Williams out of Clemson, and we're now moving into my day 2 evaluations. Antonio Williams is quite a small receiver who dealt with a hamstring injury early in the season, but could turn out to be a useful target in the slot. He isn't going to stretch the field a ton, and we'll have to see if he has the toughness to take NFL hits over the middle and hold onto the ball, but he's nifty and fluid with his routes, picking up on pockets of space in the short region, and I think he could do the same thing in the NFL if he stays healthy. At 10, I've got Skylar Bell out of UConn. Skylar Bell was the whole UConn offense this season. He often played on the outside despite looking destined to be an NFL slot player, and they often gave it to him behind the line of scrimmage or in the short region just to get the ball in his hands so he can make something happen. In the NFL, he obviously won't be as much of a standout player, but I think he could have a role. Bell is a craftsman when it comes to his release off the line, and from there he displays a decent amount of burst and long speed. With all due respect, the quarterback play was noticeably poor, at least from what I saw, and yet Bell consistently adjusted to the ball and was impressive when it came to catching through traffic, despite a lack of size. I would suggest he's more nifty than agile, meaning he can shape and get a yard on a defender, but when it actually comes to changing direction, he was surprisingly rigid. But you don't have to do everything well to play in the NFL. You just have to find your role. Bell does a great job creating half a yard of space for himself versus man. He's reliable bringing the ball in, and he's dangerous after the catch. Sounds to me like he could have himself a role. At 9, I've got Casey Concepcion out of Texas A&M. Casey Concepcion is not as big as you'd like and will probably be limited to the slot, but I think he could be effective in the right system. He is not dissimilar to Skylar Bell, who we just spoke about actually. He's great off the line and very nifty and effective at finding pockets of space, and from there he's very dangerous after the catch. So the Chiefs always come to mind for me with this type of receiver in terms of the ideal style of offense. He's not the biggest, not great when it comes to actually sticking his foot in the ground and changing direction, and his hands aren't super reliable all the time, but he can find those pockets of space, and if you get the ball out to him quickly, he can do damage. Moving into my second round evaluations, at 8 I've got Chris Brazzell II out of Tennessee. From Jalen Hyatt to Dante Thornton Jr. and now Chris Brazzell, Tennessee love a skinny, explosive receiver. At 6'5", Brazzell has a big frame for the quarterback to aim for, and despite being skinny, he does do a surprisingly good job bringing the ball in. He was one of the best in this class when it comes to getting space off the line, and from there, he is very explosive. Brazzell displays good fluidity in his routes, but with the skinnier frame, I don't see him being someone who works the busier parts of the field very often. I see him predominantly as someone to stretch the field, the same way Jameson Williams does, for example, for the Lions. At 7, I've got Elijah Surratt out of Indiana. I believe Surratt is going to be a good receiver in the NFL. He's got a full release package that he executes with precision and intention, and the intention part is something I love about his routes overall. It sounds kind of silly until you watch some of these guys run routes, and they seem to have the ability, but they're just going through the motions. Not Surratt. He runs his route with real vigour. He's also detailed in his approach to route running. You can see there's a purpose for his every movement, and I love that he uses his physicality, not just at the point of attack, but during the route, as he'll discreetly let the defender know that he's there before pulling away and finding an extra yard. You may be wondering why he's not higher in the ranking when I have so much good to say. The truth is, I think he makes the most of what he's got physically, but he's not got blazing speed. I would say he's more fluid than he is elusive as a route runner, if that makes any sense. I don't have that much bad to say about him, but I don't think he'll ever be more than a good number 2. At 6, I've got Omar Cooper Jr., also out of Indiana. Omar Cooper Jr. is the modern-day receiver, and the best example of what I mean right now is Jackson Smith-Njigba. Smith-Njigba is the best receiver on his team and has been in a fantastic scheme that suits him. Do I think he's another example of a hugely overrated receiver who leads the NFL in receiving, and now everyone just accepts he's the best receiver in the league? Yeah, but that's a conversation for another day. What he is brilliant at is selling his routes. And I feel like as the league has become less physical over the last few years, it's become even more about scheme and good play calling. So there is value to these guys who might not be the biggest, the fastest, or even the most sudden route runners, but they have an effortless feel about them in the way they're able to vary their speed and change direction, because it means they can really disguise the route they're running. Cooper has had some lower body injuries in his career, most recently a right ankle injury during the playoffs, I also thought his hands looked pretty weak at times, and as I've alluded to, he kind of drifts around. There's nothing particularly sudden or explosive about what he does, but he's phenomenal at all the stuff I just spoke about. Nifty, smooth, super crafty when it comes to varying his speed and selling his routes. He can run a go route and shake his hips as if to change direction and yet continue downfield without breaking a stride. He seemed to have really good feel for space. He's just a very satisfying watch. So I could certainly see him teaming up with his college quarterback Mendoza because he'd make a lot of sense in that Kubiak system with the Raiders. But I'd like to see him go somewhere like the Rams or the Packers because I know McVay's going to see the way he blocks. Not the biggest guy in the world, but he blocks properly. There's nothing half-hearted about it. At 5, we've got the most underrated receiver of this class, Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, and I've got a first round evaluation on him. In 2024, I had this to say about a wide receiver prospect by the name of Jalen Coker. He's not necessarily on the radar for everyone, very much small school receiver, dominated against his competition, but it's impossible to know for sure if he can make that step up. But from the footage I could find, I saw enough evidence of super high upside. I mean, some of the best route running that I've seen in this entire class. I've seen enough to know that this guy's worth taking a swing on. He was even more of a small school guy than Ted Hurst and has already dealt with some injury in the NFL, but you may have noticed him in the wildcard round this year as he had 134 yards and a touchdown versus the Rams. Coker isn't my comparison for Ted Hurst, but a lot of the same principles apply as to my feelings on the prospect. Ted Hurst was a 0-star recruit. From what I can gather, the main reason for this is that he was also at a lesser-known high school. He then committed to Division II school Valdosta State before transferring to Georgia State, obviously still a small school, but allowed him to finally pick up some recognition. The truth is, if this guy was wearing an Ohio State jersey and moving the way he does, there is not a single doubt in my mind that this would be a consensus first-round prospect. Now, he's not perfect. He was a productive basketball player out of high school, and he's got some of that Kevin Durant basketball skinniness about him. So hopefully with NFL strength and conditioning training, he'll be able to beef up a bit without losing his snap. And the other thing is that he has some really bad drops on film. Having said this, his route running ability is the real deal. There's a couple of nuances that NFL coaching will quickly clean up, like making sure he's continuing the momentum of his break or getting his release a bit less drifty and making sure he's establishing that early leverage on his defender versus man coverage. But his ability to bend his ankles and flip his hips in different directions is like a Justin Jefferson or a Garrett Wilson. It's that caliber. He's nothing special in terms of speed, but it's certainly enough. He's got a tall frame for quarterbacks to aim for, and he actually tracks the ball incredibly well. It's probably just a bit of work on technique in terms of his hands, and NFL coaches will have him in a whole new world of volume in terms of catching reps in practice. So this is a risk, but there's so many decent receivers in the NFL, you're going to get more chances to draft a reliable number 2. You might not get another chance to draft a guy who, with a bit of polish, is a top 10 type of receiver in the NFL. At number 4, I've got Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. Zachariah Branch is a major sleeper in this class, and my assumption as to why that is that for all his capability, Georgia used him very much as a gadget player. In fact, over 50% of his targets were from behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm not suggesting that this is your traditional X receiver. Branch is 5'10", 180 pounds. He's incredibly shifty, very dangerous after the catch. So you can get creative with him, get the ball in his hands on screens, jet sweeps, etc. But my point is that although he's probably going to do a lot of his damage from the slot, this guy is not someone the opposition is going to want running over the middle of the field. He is electric, super explosive, dynamic, elusive route runner. And I haven't looked into his character or anything, but you can feel the feistiness radiating off the screen when you watch his film. I saw him make a catch versus Florida over the middle and he got smoked. But even as a smaller guy, he held onto the ball and got right back up. So explosive, elusive, brings the ball in through contact, dangerous after the catch. Let me know what I'm missing because all I can see is that he's not the biggest and will probably be a slot player. This is one hell of a weapon. At number 3, I've got Makai Lemon out of USC. The only thing I can really criticise Makai Lemon for is that he's probably going to be a slot player given his size, and there's 2 receivers in his class who are also outstanding and can play on the outside. His movement and ability to change direction is phenomenal. Very loose, very fluid, he's savvy with his routes, he's calculated in the way he sets them up, and although he's not going to be a contested catch threat, he is very reliable bringing the ball in. Lemon has the speed to stretch the field from the slot, and his usage will depend on the offense he's drafted into, but I see him being the type of receiver who could lead the league in receptions, and the exciting thing about Lemon is he's got the explosiveness to make things happen after the catch as well. So I guess what I'm saying is if Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jalen Waddle had a baby, that's what Makai Lemon is. At 2, I've got Carnell Tate out of Ohio State. Carnell Tate is a machine. He combines the speed, physicality and ability bringing the ball in of someone who can really back a defense off due to his threat downfield with highly nuanced and elusive route running, making it seemingly impossible at times for defenders to stay on top of him. He has missed games due to a calf injury this year, but apart from that, I actually don't have a lot to say about him because I don't think there's much complexity in the conversation. He's just good at everything. I have practically no questions, but the one thing I will say just to separate him from number 1 is that route running is the thing I value the most, and he's not quite on the level of the guy I've got at number 1. At 1, I've got Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. I think Jordan Tyson will walk into the NFL as one of, if not the best route runner in the NFL. Remember in 2024 when everyone was anointing Marvin Harrison Jr. as a generational receiver prospect, largely due to his so-called exceptional route running ability. I liked Marvin Harrison Jr., but he was my wide receiver 3 behind Ladd McConkey and Malik Neighbors because he's actually not that elusive. He just ran an NFL route tree, played for Ohio State, and had the name of a former NFL receiver. Jordan Tyson is what it's supposed to look like when you're talking about someone being a truly elite route runner. The 2 best route runners in the league at the moment, in my opinion, are Justin Jefferson and Garrett Wilson, and Jordan Tyson looks to me like he's of that caliber. I've compared him to CeeDee Lamb because it's the same sort of wiry 6'2" frame. He doesn't possess elite speed. I would say it's on par with a CeeDee Lamb or a Justin Jefferson. And I would also say where CeeDee Lamb has his drop issues every now and then, Tyson could be similar. He didn't have very many drops in college, but I just get the feeling it's not natural hands. He likes to catch with the body, but when you're open as often as I think he'll be, you don't have to be special bringing the ball in. Injuries will be the question mark for Tyson. In 2023, he dealt with knee injuries. In 2024, it was a collarbone injury. And then this year, he had a hamstring injury. My argument for why he's still number 1 is that injuries are impossible to predict, and he's a special enough talent to take the risk on, even in the early stages of the draft. So I haven't looked at all the positions yet, but wide receiver seems to be the standout for me in terms of value. And in contrast to previous years where I haven't been so high on the consensus top prospects like Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze or Ted McMillan, I'm in total agreement this year that Jordan Tyson, Carnell Tate and Makai Lemon are absolute studs. Where I'm probably even higher on this class than the consensus is I think Zachariah Branch and Ted Hurst are genuine first round talents as well that someone is going to get in the 2nd, 3rd or 4th round. But that's all from me. If you did enjoy the content, please consider liking and subscribing. I'll be back with cornerbacks next, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you next time.